Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, one is star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. It is a perfect day.
Woke up to the sound of the garbage truck again. Upstairs neighbor's toilet's leaking on my head. And cars broke down, I missed the bus, there runs a 10. I had a feeling this was a day to stay in bed. I finally left my pad right on the jumbo's cloud roof. A police officer pulled out his gun and said, I said, so you got the wrong guy. I guess it's just the perfect day. It's just the perfect day. Na, na, na,
Hey guys, welcome back to another great episode of Eggs. Today our special guest is Lori Hibma. Lori is the CEO and founder of CP Solutions and VMD Services in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She's also a business coach, public speaker, and knows a thing or two about marketing. We're really excited to have her on, so without any further delay, please join me in welcoming Lori Hibma.
Well, cool. Well, thank you, Lori, so much for making the time to do this show. I know right now in the middle of this COVID crisis and the world being turned upside down, it's really difficult for people to find time, even though it feels like we should have more time than ever. So we are very grateful for you to call in and take the time to do this.
Oh, glad to be here. That's great.
Yeah, so let's get things started here, Lori. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you, your history, kind of where your business career started and where you're at now.
Yeah, so I've worked in a lot of different industries over time. I've done everything from hospitality and tourism all the way into working in medical practices. And that's basically what was the launch pad for me is I was working with a medical practice and was doing their marketing and at the same time finishing up a degree and just had decided, hey, you know what, I'm going to do this from home. I'm going to do it on the side. Not going to work too hard. And next thing you know, I've got an agency with employees.
So did you work in an agency environment beforehand, or did you just kind of start from scratch and do your own thing?
No, I started from scratch. I did it the hard way.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because I think that a lot of people get into, the agency style of work this way, right? They have the opportunity to do this work for an employer and then, discover quickly that could be a niche in and of itself. So I think that's really cool that you did that. And I mean, I don't know if you want to talk briefly about your companies. I know that you guys spend a lot of time in the marketing realm in and around healthcare. So if you'd like to talk a little bit about just the businesses and what they do, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, I have two marketing agencies. The first one is CP Solutions, and that is geared, we're located in Zeeland, Michigan, which most people won't even be able to find on a map, but it's over by Lake Michigan. It's about 20, 25 miles from Grand Rapids. And CP Solutions really focuses more on our local community, our local businesses. Very geared towards small business, small to medium. A lot of website development, a lot of your standard, what we would have called digital marketing, say 5 years ago. And then we have a secondary subsidiary, and it's VMD Services. And VMD Services basically works in the medical niche, right? So we work with podiatrists and plastic surgeons and orthodontists, physical therapists. So a lot of different private practice. Some not so private. They may have 3, 4, 5. Some have 10 doctors in the practice. So they can be rather big groups, but so we have two different agencies that kind of focus on two completely different niches.
Is there a reason you separated the two and went with two separate ones? Is there any legal reasons why you would do that for medical versus just a regular agency?
Actually, it is for medical reasons. When you're dealing with medical, you're dealing with HIPAA, right? A lot of regulations around HIPAA and other considerations that doctors have to have, insurance, malpractice, all those good things. So you have to be really careful and hone those messages very, very carefully. And if for some horrible reason somebody ever did something dumb, right? Because occasionally that happens. I wanted to be able to protect the rest of my business if I should have an issue in the medical arena at all. And that was on the advice of our legal team.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, that's a really interesting insight, because I think it's something that not a lot of people starting, into the agency world might think of. I mean, it's something's very specific to medical. And I happen to be aware of that kind of thing just because my agency does a lot of work in medical too, on the insurance side.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's an interesting thing. I wonder though, if you would talk a little bit about sort of the challenges in making the change or making the jump. So, I mean, were you always entrepreneurial by nature, or was this something that you just slipped into by way of happenstance?
Well, I thought I slipped into it by way of happenstance, but my husband would tell you something completely different. I've always had something on the side. I've always had some kind of hustle going on the side. I owned my own photography business for 12 years. This was back in the day of film, actual film, and I shot weddings. I've always had some kind of extra income coming in on the side just because I don't sit very well. I'm one of those people that has a hard time making it through. If I'm sitting for a whole movie, I can guarantee you I'm half asleep through half of it. So it's just kind of the way it is. But yeah, I've always had something kind of going on the side. And at one point in time, when I went into the hospitality and tourism industry, I had decided to give up all of that work for yourself side hustle and decided to go work for somebody else and do their marketing and work with them on marketing. And after working there for 3 years and working in hospitality and tourism, right, there's no holidays, there's no weekends. In fact, that's when you're your busiest. And so after 3 years of just really not getting to spend any holidays with my family and not getting to spend any time in the evenings with anybody, and I just decided enough is enough. I went into the medical industry, did some marketing there for a medical practice, and just really, that's when I really said, with everything I've ever done, I've always done my own marketing. I've always been the one looking to do it differently, to do it better. And somebody had told me there was a guy who was kind of consulting with the doctor that I was working with. And he was actually helping her with a valuation of her practice. And he even told me, he goes, I know all the numbers. He goes, I don't know why you aren't working for yourself. And anytime somebody plants that little bug into somebody who maybe has a little bit more of a bend towards being an entrepreneur, it's just dangerous, right? So I just went out. I went out on my own and connected with business coach and worked with him and helped him, and he helped me, and we built just a couple of different businesses that work really well together. So yeah, it just worked.
Oh, that's great. Can you point to any specific challenges or things that you had to overcome in, I guess, hanging out your shingle for the first time? I mean, it sounds like because you already had kind of a bent and you're already feeling entrepreneurial, maybe it's coming off as if it went very, very smoothly. And maybe it did. I just am curious if there were any stumbles along the way, especially getting into something as sophisticated as medical work. There's
always stumbles. I think the biggest challenge is learning to be confident in yourself. Especially going back. So I've been in business now for 10 years. Going back 10 years ago, I mean, we were still, before I actually started the business and was doing websites on the side, we were still using Dreamweaver. We were still hard coding, right? And going all the way back to that time, very few women did that. That was a huge challenge, is to get around the thought process that women could be coders.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, even now, I consult for
Yeah.
a couple ad agencies and, large agencies. And I mean, the percentage of women on the creative teams or on the programming teams, things like that are very, very few.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that would have been my biggest challenge, is just kind of establishing myself without, I am not a person who wants to pay a lot of attention to gender, right? I do believe in equality, obviously, but I just feel like if we're going to get past the conversation of gender, then let's not make it about gender. So yeah, I really feel like it's just about establishing yourself and being confident in who you are. And it took a lot of years. In fact, I would say I really didn't even come into being confident into who I am until probably about 3 years ago.
That seems about right.
Yeah, no. And, it's funny that you say that, because I think so much, this is one of the things I'm learning as I get older is I just turned 40. So maybe I'm, at a stage in life now where I'm starting to be a little more introspective. I've got a couple kids and stuff. And, I have found that, I still suffer with the confidence thing all the time. And it's really, I appreciate your being open about something like that, because I think that the inclination among so many people is to just put a good face out there and sort of pretend that it's great. And I think the real detriment to doing that is for young people coming up. They see that and they go, oh, well, I'm not that at all. Like, how can I relate to you as somebody who's so confident, so powerful? I think it's really important to sort of at least recognize our insecurities, to be able to work through them.
Yeah. I was given a piece of advice once, and that was never pull the curtain back enough for them to see you bleed, sweat, or cry. And I took that at heart. Now, that doesn't mean, though, like you said, you're asking me personally what kind of challenges. I can tell you for a fact there were plenty of times I was bleeding, sweating, and crying the business. So, yeah.
I think that's pretty standard in most small businesses, whether they see it or not. I think it happens pretty much in every startup.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I would agree.
When you switched over from your 9 to 5 and got into the advertising world, did you have a client that kind of helped you go, or did you just cut the ties and said, I'm done here, take 6 months and start finding clients?
Oh, that's kind of a funny story. So yeah, the business coach that was working with the doctor that I'd been working with, when I took this other coach's advice and went out on my own, and I contacted the business coach that was working with my doctor, and I was like, I'm part of your masterminding group. I don't want to quit. I want you to be my coach. And he was like, can't, you're not a doctor. I only work with doctors. And, but he was still very encouraging, and he's like, give it a shot and let me know when you actually are out on your own. Otherwise even talking to you about it's kind of a conflict, because he was getting paid by the lady I just left. So he didn't want to talk to me. And so I waited, I think, about 6 weeks, and I just called him and I said, okay, I did what you said. And I went out on my own, or not what he said, but I did what I thought I needed to do. I'm out on my own, and paycheck's not happening now. Now what? And just really asked him for a lot of advice, and he started referring people to me, and then we worked out a working relationship between the two of us. And he was the main source of our referrals for probably 7 years.
That's really cool. It's a story that I hear with a lot, not even just in medical, but a lot of agency founders, is there's oftentimes that one person, that one business or that one whatever that is the thing that allows them to transition. With one of the agencies that I consult, actually, the guys that have Aetna as a client, their whole thing was they won a contract with United Health, 25 years ago or whatever. And that was it, right? Then from there, everything else sort of snowballed. So it's really interesting to hear kind of a backstory like that. I wonder, so I see a couple things on we've got a bio sheet here that has some information on you. But one thing I wanted to talk to you about specifically was about this work-life balance. So according to this document, it says you believe it's a myth. And I tend to agree with you. But what I'm really interested about, and the reason I want to bring that up, is because you mentioned that one of the driving factors in pushing you into business for yourself was that you weren't getting enough time with family. You weren't getting enough, free time on holidays and things like that to really just, I guess, enjoy the life you're living. And, one of the things that really happens, in and around agencies, even if you don't have a lot of experience in an agency, is the culture really pushes you to work every last minute, and really kill yourself for the business. And, for a lot of, entrepreneurs I know who have gone out and started, creative agencies and things like that, they, typically do so for these reasons, right? This idea of, I guess we made it jargony by calling it a work-life balance, but we're looking for something other than just work balance. And so I wondered if you talk a little bit about your perspective on that, and, have you achieved some level of it?
Are you Zen?
I have a whole story about Zen. That's a whole topic. But yeah, so the reason I think that work-life balance is a myth, or in some cases, I just even think it's a joke, especially in the agency setting, because we're constantly, I mean, let's face it, everything we do changes on a dime. You can be cruising along, a client can call, and whatever strategy and campaigns you're in the middle of can change overnight, right? Or in 20 minutes even. So we move very quickly, which means we all have to be able to pivot on a dime, which then leaves us with all these undone things, right? So you're in the middle of something, a phone call comes in, and you have to completely switch your gears and go in a different direction. But you know what you were doing before that phone call came in still has to get done, right? Mm-hmm. And so we end up with, I would say, easily twice the amount of work that we thought we would have. Easily. I think we underestimate the amount of work that goes into an agency. But the other thing the reason I don't believe in work-life balance is because I believe you are either working really heavy in work and paying a little bit of attention to life, or you're doing a lot of life with a little attention to work. And I think it really depends on the season you're at in your business, for starters, because if obviously you don't get to have that heavy life balance or life piece happening if you don't have people around you to support you in your business and help you run it. So I think it depends a lot on the season of life that you're in and the season of your business. I worked 70, 80 hours for, probably 6 years. Very rarely took a vacation. And if I did, half of the vacation, my husband and children were enjoying, and I was on the phone or I was on the computer or whatever. I just never unplugged. And then about 4 years ago, I actually went on a vacation out of the country.
Oh, I like this.
And there was no internet. I mean, nothing. No cell service, no internet. We were told there would be. So of course I took my computer, I took my phone, I took everything with me, but there was none. I mean, even to just get a call from the hotel room to the hotel desk was a challenge. It was better to just walk to the desk. So it really ended up being eye-opening for me. And the first 2 days, I think I almost lost my mind. And then all of a sudden I realized, I'm in this beautiful place and I'm getting little drinks with little umbrellas in them. And I'm worried about something. The only way I can fix this is if I get on an airplane and leave. And am I willing to do that? And my answer was, first of all, no, I'm not. And then you have to ask yourself, well, why am I not? And it's like, well, I have a team. I have a team of good people. I made the arrangements ahead of time. They're handling it. This is all good. We're good. We're good.
So when you got back from that week hiatus of not being able to contact anyone, was the business on fire and everything imploded, or did your team handle it right?
No, they handled it. In fact, it was the best thing I could have done, because it taught me more so than them even. It taught me. I think they were just waiting to step up. I think they were just waiting to step in for me. But it taught me to let go. It just taught me, like, okay, you can work crazy. You can do all this. You can be involved. But then when you do to say you're taking a break, you just really stick to that and you take a break. And the other thing I did is I started putting parameters in place. I was one of those people that I'd let clients call me at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. Sometimes they were calling me at 6 in the morning, right? Because doctors work crazy hours. Mm-hmm. And I just got to a point where I was like, no, I'm available between 8 and 5. And I had to actually think about it in the terms of, is anything I am doing going to cost somebody their life? Right? And as a marketing agency, as an advertising agency, there's nothing we're doing that's going to cost somebody their life, period. We're not doctors. We're not nurses. We don't need to respond in the next, 10 seconds to save a life. So putting those parameters in place really helped. I still don't believe in work-life balance. I believe you're either working really hard or you're living really hard. And I think if you really want to find balance, you just have to know when it's time for each of those to happen. And you have to realize that, if I'm going to work, for instance, okay, so I'm stuck here in Michigan because of COVID. And if I'm going to work like I'm working now, where my husband and my daughter aren't with me, and I'm working very long days, very long hours, but you know what? When I go back, when I finally get to leave Michigan, I'm going to shut it down probably for a week. And my team knows. We have a saying. I'm like, unless they're bleeding, don't call me. That was actually something we used when we would leave our boys with babysitters. It was like, unless one of them is bleeding, just don't call us. When we would go out on a date. I use that same philosophy in my business. It's like, unless somebody is bleeding, I just don't want to know about it. It can wait until the next day. Otherwise, you just got to have faith the team's going to handle it, and they may screw it up. In fact, they will a couple of times, and you'll have a fire to take care of the next day, and you take care of it.
Well, and that's the thing, right? I mean, you have to allow opportunity for people to grow and for people to improve. And the more you can trust and rely on them, the better it is for everything. You touched on one thing that I think's really interesting is this idea of sort of developing a routine or putting up these parameters. I think this is one of the challenges for a lot of self-employed people. And a lot of people, young entrepreneurs entrepreneurs of all ages who are trying to get businesses going. To your point about working hard or living hard, I mean, so many of us, work too hard, right? And I think that's where these ideas, or I guess, subjectively you work too hard. And, but I think that's where these ideas like these, aspirational setting of a work-life balance, where that comes from. But I think one of the things that you mentioned specifically that it doesn't feel like loosening up, but it actually is development of a routine and putting up these parameters. A lot of people would look at that as these are rules or regulations, or, somehow this is more complex or some more difficult. Right. But what it does is it actually does allow you the freedom. It does give you more of that life back and does allow you to get a little closer to an equilibrium, even if balance is sort of a pretend thing that we're chasing.
Right.
And so I think that that's a really great point bringing that up. While we're talking about sort of, thing versus thing, I know that you also sort of advocate a little bit for the ongoing and raging battle between marketing and sales. And I think for maybe a lot of novice listeners who maybe don't do this kind of work on a sophisticated level, it might help to start this conversation or this little aspect of the conversation by breaking out the difference between sales and marketing. And then, let's talk about sort of this battle between them.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, if you're in business, I don't care what kind of business you have. Even if you're working in a home business with a downline, or you're a doctor or a lawyer or you're a corporation, basically everybody has some form of sales and some form of marketing happening in their business. And I think, especially if you are somebody who's in the process of fast growth, the lines start to get they get really blurry. And then it's almost as if they separate and they become at odds with each other. And I really do believe that marketing and sales are not supposed to be at odds. That, granted, in the old world of advertising, it was most definitely you had salespeople who were following leads, and it just became very, very you do marketing, you're doing this, and sales, you're doing that. And I honestly believe that we got to get rid of the battle line there. They should be a team together, not apart. They should not be siloed against each other at all. I think that the minute you take away that battleground, then is when you're going to see the exponential growth. Then you will see your business really take off.
So I'm not in the advertising world. I've never worked in an agency. I'm just kind of a solo guy on my own, doing my own thing. And Ryan's been in that world before. And I think what he's kind of referencing or referring to is like the sales guys will go out and promise the clients the world and then not consult with like the ad guys or the web guys. And then they come in and say, hey, we said we can do this, but we can't. And now they're butting heads and it's an ongoing battle. How do you like alleviate that kind of miscommunication and have the team work together as a team versus us versus them? Yeah.
So, and that actually brings in a third party, which is your engineering team, basically, right? So you have your marketing team, and they're the ones generating all the leads and helping you come up with the right people, the salespeople, the right people to talk to. And then you have the sales team, and they're talking to the right people, but now they've overpromised something we can't deliver or something we've never delivered before, which is more common than the other. Believe it or not, they're promising that we'll deliver something we've never delivered before, more so than because I don't believe in, somebody says, well, we can't do that. I instantly start bucking the system a little bit at that because I don't like anybody telling me what I can't do. So I instantly go out for that. Okay, there has to be a solution here. It may not be what we want, but we made a promise to the client. So we're going to go back and we're going to figure out how we're going to do that, right? We're going to, one way or another, we're going to make it work.
Sure.
So I mean, I think that when and trust me, I've done it. In fact, about 2 years ago, I promised a client something that I should never have promised a client. And we probably ended up eating about 200 hours worth of work.
Ouch.
Well, it's really easy to do.
It stung a lot because I promised, I promised something. And I even remember the very first time I sat down with the engineer and he was like, are you kidding me? I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, you never want to hear that from your engineer.
Can we take? Can we take a step back from when? Let's go back to your first employee, the first person you hired. Was it a salesperson or was it someone to help with the design and the day-to-day aspects of your?
Actually, it was an assistant.
Okay.
I hired an assistant who then later became a writer. It was one of those situations where as I was building the business, you remember I was supposed to be doing this on the side from home, wasn't supposed to be a big deal. And before I knew it, I had, 12 clients. I was working 90 hours a day. I was doing everything. I was doing their websites. I was writing all of their content. I was doing all of their SEO. I was doing their ads. I 100% for all 12. And, this is back when you were only charging, say, $70 an hour. So it's not like you were making gobs and gobs of money. And so I got to a point where the first person I hired was an assistant to take over some things that I just knew I needed to get off my plate. And then I kept the technical. I'm not sure I would advise that again, but my first employee, and she started in October, and by March of the next year, I had 6 employees sitting around my kitchen table.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, that is great. So can another thing that you touched on earlier that I'd like to sort of dig into a little bit, because I think it's really important, and maybe it helped you, as you were hiring and as you were making decisions to hire, because I know a lot of sort of, solo operators and freelancers who not unlike you are doing a lot of the work themselves and trying to do as much as they could. And ultimately, eventually you have to, trust somebody or take the step to, if you're going to scale, you've got to bring people on. And you talked earlier about developing a confidence first as an employee, but I wonder about your confidence as an employer. And if you could sort of talk about the things that went into that, whether it was sort of age and time served, whether it was skill development, or whether it was out of necessity.
So, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, 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 I think the A lot of each, actually, believe it or not. So, I mean, when you work for yourself, I think the one thing people forget is when you work for yourself, you're still an employee. You just answer to more people when you work for yourself. You answer to your employees, right? But you answer to your clients, and you answer to the bank and the IRS, and there's a lot of people you start answering to when you are an entrepreneur, when you're working for yourself. So those are things, I think that's that soft skill set that you develop as far as becoming confident in those areas through trial and just basically through trial and fire, right? I mean, you really have to figure out what the daily battle is going to be that day. Now, as far as being confident with employees, again, that is, it wasn't until I actually had an interaction with an intern that my confidence really soared as an employer. And basically, I had hired an intern through a college program, and they'd worked with us for about 6 weeks, and we were going to offer them a position. They were a hard worker, and they walked into my office, and they basically said, well, I don't understand why I can't make what you do, and I don't understand why I can't have this corner office.
Sounds like something I would do.
Sounds very millennial.
I just remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, you have no clue, right? I mean, you really don't know what you're talking about. And it was at that point, it was like a little alarm went off in my head. And I thought, they really don't. And yet there are times I feel like as an employer, I don't know what I'm doing, but I really do. So I was able to have that conversation with them and make sure they understood that it doesn't work that way. Yeah. But I think that, you end up in those positions. I've had interns call me and ask me if it's a snow day, Yeah, I've had people calling sick to work, and then on Facebook, they're out on the ski slopes, you see all sorts of things, right? And I think every time you have one of those instances happen, you grow as an employer, you grow confidence in how you're going to handle it. And you're not going to handle it right. I mean, I can tell you so many different times where I did not handle it well at all. In fact, there are people who used to work for me that would tell you the same thing. I think that is just a part of growing in business in general, whether you're even an employer. I mean, even as a coworker, you're going to do stupid things, right? I mean, you're going to tick off a coworker at some point in time. You're going to, take off your boss. You're going to do something stupid. You're going to stick your foot in your mouth. I think that just comes with time and experience.
Yeah, I think it's just sort of the human experience, right? I mean, it's the same with parenting. Yeah. It's the same with, playing team sports. I mean, you have to have to learn roles. You have to understand, leadership versus, worker bees. You have to sort of, all these things. And I think there's this thing out there sort of among young entrepreneurs where they admire, the Jeff Bezoses or the whomever's out there, and they're looking at these guys like they just achieved all this stuff and it was so slick and so easy and this whole thing, and they never hear about this part, the part of it that no, I was a horrible boss for a while. Like it took me a while to understand what an employee even needs from me. I mean, because you can't just know. I mean, school can prepare you in some ways, working for others can prepare you in others, but when you're out there on your own and you're trying to make it work, I think it's underappreciated how much learning on the job is being done.
So
I agree.
I just jumped on your website a second ago, and
oh, no. It always makes me nervous when somebody says that. Don't know why, but it does. See, there goes the confidence right there.
Well, I was saying your team page. It looks like you have 15 to 20 employees there now. Do you have
we're sitting at about 20 right now?
Okay. Do you have an HR department, or are you still kind of just winging it?
Nope. We've had HR generalists in the past, but 20 people, you really just don't need an HR department.
Sure.
I, through trial and error and making a lot of mistakes and I've worked with HR consultants and paycheck companies, and through a lot of experience, I've learned what the rules are, right? So I have myself, and then I have a COO, and his name's Tyler Cady, but he's phenomenal. He has his MBA, and he's just, when it comes to finance and numbers and a lot of the legal stuff, he's so much better at it. Yeah, he's so much better at it than I am. We joke about it because he and I are a lot alike. Our team calls us intense. But we're both intense in very different ways. So he's got his strengths. He takes, I love the fact that he has to deal with the finances, and I just read the reports. He takes care of a lot of the legal aspects of it. He takes care of sales. I take care of marketing and training. And so we've been able to divide that up really. But yeah, so we have a team of 20, and I love them all.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Is that a pretty even split between sales and ad guys and people actually creating the product and people actually going out and pitching the product? Or is it?
No, myself and Tyler are the only salespeople.
Okay.
We still do keep a very hands-on approach to that. And I'm it's kind of funny because I always called myself similar to the dentist with the rotting teeth. As a marketing agency, we put our first website up 4 years ago. I've been in business 10 years and did digital marketing for 10 years. And I literally just put our first website up 4 years ago. So we really grew the business based on word of mouth.
Sure.
And referral. And so that was a huge thing for me. So our vetting process has always been very defined, right? Because when you're dealing with word of mouth, you have to really learn who you're talking to quickly. So we really rely heavily on word of mouth and background. We do a lot of background checks. Like before I even get on the phone with a client, if they haven't felt stalked in the past, they should now, because my team's looking at everything. We're looking at their online presence. We're looking at everything about them. Through experience, we've learned that we need to be able to vet the clients just like they're vetting us to do the work. We need to vet them. It's got to be a good fit both ways.
Well, not only do you have to decide if you actually want to work with them, you actually have to decide on what kind of work you need to provide them. So you're doing your research on how you can help them at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. And there are some, I can tell you, there are some that we run from, right? I mean, you get online with some people and, maybe something in their past has created this. They're entrepreneurs. Maybe they've got one or two employees, and you look into them and all of a sudden you find out, something in their past. There's nothing in the world that's going to get you past that, So for instance, maybe they had a criminal past. We had that happen once. They had a criminal past, and I couldn't get behind the business that they were promoting based on what I saw in their past. Yeah. I was always going to struggle with helping them with that message because I felt like they were at odds. It just wasn't a genuine message. It was about making $1, not really about being helpful like it needed to be. So, I mean, we've dealt with all of that. We've dealt with, somebody asked me to get involved in cannabis, right? Live in Colorado. So I was asked to get involved in supporting the cannabis business. We even considered it. You can have all sorts of opinions about it. But the simple fact of the matter is the federal government's not supporting it yet. And from a business standpoint, I struggle with taking that risk.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really important thing that you bring up, especially for younger business people, or new entrepreneurs, and especially people in the creative industries. There is this like vibe that you're always hungry and will take any comer who's willing to write you a check, and I think for a lot of young people, especially, they get into situations where they're working with companies that, maybe they don't necessarily have to be unsavory, but maybe they're just not a great fit, or the leadership of that company doesn't really gel with the way you're working or whatever. And I think it's really insightful to, this idea of sort of interviewing your clients too, because I think that's something that so many people don't. They stand around and they wait and they hope somebody will come along, and then somebody does, and God willing, you're not in a situation where you have to take their money. But so many people do, and they just they live sort of in this feast famine cycle. So when times are bad, you take questionable work, and so I think it's really important that regardless of how you're set up, to maintain that ethos and sort of be sure that you're only taking people that you feel good about. I think it allows you to contribute value, like you said, and not chase the buck.
Yeah. But we didn't start it off that way. Hey, when you're hungry and you're looking for a paycheck, you take the work, right? And it wasn't until I learned the hard lessons from taking the work, which happened actually very quickly. When you do that, when you take the work, just to take the work, and that there's questions around it in your head, you do learn really quickly. I learned really fast that those clients take 3 times the amount of time, take 3 times the resources. They're the ones that keep you up at night. They're the ones that make you worry about things.
And they're the ones the least.
They are paying the least, or they're the least responsive, or. But those are the ones that make you ask yourself, when you're dealing with that kind of client, and what you're asking yourself is, why am I in this business? You should instantly know, okay, I'm in this business because I like it, but I'm feeling this way because this was the wrong client for me. This is the wrong person for me to work with.
Did you actually have like client A and client B? Client A is perfect and B isn't, and you could tell the difference between the two? Or is it like I'm a year and a half down, I've had 10 clients and 7 out of them have been horrible, and those 3.
Hard to see the forest from the trees sometimes.
Yeah. For us, it ended up being more, 10 clients out of 10 clients, we had 1 bad apple. And I always tell people, though, the bad part about a poisonous apple is if you put a poisonous apple in a good apple pie, the whole pie is now poisonous, right?
Yep.
So 1 poison client, when you have a team atmosphere and it's all collaborative, 1 poisonous person, 1 poisonous, and whether it's an employee or a client or anybody, 1 poisonous apple in that pie ruins the whole thing. So when you're working with a team and you're working collaboratively and you have 1 bad client, pretty soon your team's going to have a bad attitude because they're all dealing with this bad client, right? They're all sick of them. We had 1 client that if we saw that number come up on caller ID, we all just sat and watched the phone. Nobody was picking it up, right? I mean, this was early on, but we were just like, there's no way, way,
So, having to go down the road and having that 1 client, can you talk about the process of actually firing that client? We at points we do have to do that. We have to kind of have that conversation. And it's not an easy Band-Aid to pull off sometimes. Have you had any experience with that, and any suggestions on how to fire a client in a positive way?
In a positive way, that's a challenge. First of all, I have, even before having my own agency, I learned through business and through life experience that you always have to, have a little CYA, right? You always have to have that in place.
Yep,
and so from the get-go of my agency, I always required phone calls were recorded, emails were kept, never deleted. Every time a phone call with a client happened, if say they called on a cell phone and we couldn't record the call or something like that, a summary of that phone call had to be emailed to the client. If it was from an account manager, I had to be copied, whatever the case. But I mean, all communication was well documented. And, typically when a client quits, they quit because they say, well, there are three things that cause a client to quit in the agency atmosphere. Poor communication, right? So I've been calling your team, they're not answering me. Well, I can go in, I can look and say, oh, you know what? They did answer you. Here it is. Boom, 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 right? So poor communication will cause a client to quit. ROI or lack of ROI will cause a client to quit, or your inability or an agency's inability to show value for the work they're doing. And those are ROI and showing value are two completely separate things. They intersect, but they are separate.
Can you break those down for us? ROI, it's pretty, people know return on investment, or
right.
How do you, what metrics are you using to show the client that they're getting their value's worth? It's hard in the digital world. Like, we got 4 clicks on this banner ad, and I don't know. How do you kind of work with your client and explain what the return on their investment is?
Well, it's kind of funny. So I was at a conference and I was speaking, and I asked the entire room, I said, if somebody says conversion to you, if you're working with your digital agency and they say conversion, what does that mean to you? And all but one, I asked 5 different people, and all but one stood up and said, well, it means I'm getting paid. It means I'm making money, right? And there was one that stood up and said, no, it just means that there's an action that happened. And I was like, that's correct. So clients, regardless of what industry they're in, when you say the word conversion, so if you're talking to a business about ROI and you're like, oh, you've had 20 conversions happen, and you've had this many click-throughs, and, we're tracking it in that way, but that's our jargon, that's our lingo. And the client's not hearing that. The client wants one thing: dollars in the door. I always tell them, I'm like, they want dollars in the door, butts in the seat, pick something. But if the client's not seeing the dollars in the bank account happen, then as far as they're concerned, there is no ROI. It's plain and simple.
Sure.
So ROI isn't about conversion. ROI is about dollars in the door. Now value, that's totally different, but they do intersect, because if you don't do ROI, if you can't show that you're producing for your client, then you got a whole slew of problems. Maybe you've got bad employees, maybe you've got bad systems, maybe you've got the wrong tools, maybe you have somebody who just doesn't know what they're doing. There's a whole line of lists of things that you go down when ROI doesn't exist, and that's probably the most painful list to go down, because you're actually waiting for them to ask the right questions, and you're actually trying to figure out how you prove that what you're seeing from a conversion standpoint translates into dollars in the door. So that's where you end up having to go down the road for ROI. You have to go down the road of being able to ask the right questions for your industry. So for instance, when I am dealing with a doctor's office, we're not just asking them, we're telling them, here are your numbers. We're asking them questions like, did your patient count go up? How many new patients? What kind of patients? What is your, PVV? What are you, all we start going down the road and even end up in their financial situation and going through their finances with them, because we have to actually be able to prove that what we're doing is resulting in dollars in the door. If I can't prove that it's dollars in the door, I'm not doing my job. I'm really passionate about that, because I don't want to be just another agency that's throwing a few banner ads out and saying, here you go. I really want to be that agency that can show value for what we do. And then the value of that ROI, or the value of what you do, comes into play there, because the value of what you do is more than just ROI. Meaning, if I get a client and they come to me, a lot of times they come to me from another agency, and what I hear is, I was with this agency, they sent me these monthly reports. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know what they did for me. I'm not happy with what they did. I don't think it resulted in any kind of ROI. And they go on and on and on. Well, value for my clients is, for instance, our clients have a portal. They can actually log in and see the work happening in real time. They can tell if my team's online, if my team's on their account, if everything is happening, like literally down to some of the most minute tasks in an account, like, oh, this blog was edited. The client can actually see that. And we went down that road. We have a term, we call it guaranteed transparency. And we actually went down that road very specifically because we kept hearing from clients, I'm coming from this other agency. They're not telling me what they're doing. I don't know what I'm paid for. I'm frustrated. And to me, when you take away the unknown, you eliminate a lot of frustration. So by getting rid of all of that, you really open yourself up to having the right conversations around ROI when you provide the right value. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And one of the things you brought up too, I think is especially interesting because I think it's something that so many people are bad at. You alluded to sort of the jargon in the agency business. We use a lot of vocabulary to say and do different things. And, I think the observation that you need to actually stop and define some of these terms or understand what your client's definition of the term is a really great observation, because so much of what happens, or like when a client relationship fails, is based on communication. And, communication doesn't necessarily mean you didn't send me enough emails or generate enough reports. But if there's misalignment in understanding of what something's going on, like the point you made with conversions is massive. And a lot of times, especially as it pertains to value, for example, the client's value may have nothing to do with money. Maybe they just appreciate this project, or they think it's valuable for one reason or another. And, it's not really your job to put their values on a project. Like you are there to facilitate whatever they think is important. And I think by setting, clear expectations, making sure that everybody's on the same page as far as definitions go, and then providing value via, executing against the, what is important to your client. I think it gives you a lot of opportunity to really excel with a client. And so, this idea of definitions, especially as it pertains to, these items of value, if the project isn't meant to have an ROI or isn't designed with some kind of metric in mind, then if they later hold you accountable for that, like how could you ever be successful? So I think it is really important to break that down. And I love this idea of just, setting definitions and setting expectations to make sure that we're all, working with the same metrics, I guess.
Yeah. I think you have to do that right from the get-go. The very first thing we do is ask a client what their goals are. And then we break those goals down into achievable milestones, and they have to be achievable, right? SMART goals. Because if we're promising something and we can't deliver, then we're going to be that agency they go to another agency and talk to about, right? We're going to be the ones that didn't show value or didn't show ROI. And not everything is about ROI. You get an entrepreneur who's brand spanking new and they just don't even know where to start from a marketing standpoint. They're not expecting you to turn their world upside down. They're just asking you to get started. They're just asking you to help them down the road, so that maybe down the road you can help them turn that business into something bigger. But a lot of them don't know what a marketing plan is, right? So, value can come in a lot of different shapes.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. So as we're sort of winding down here and getting to the end of this conversation, one of the things I just wanted to talk about quickly was the mentorship and the coaching you do. I know that, you do work in and around business and employment coaching, things like that. But I wonder if you talk a little bit about your mentorship and your, coaching perspective, just because I think there are so many people that either underestimate or overestimate the value of mentorship and things like that. And you mentioned early on in the conversation, having worked with a business coach almost from the beginning, which most people, myself included, didn't engage our first business coach until much later in life. Like we'd already been working for a long time, and we, didn't even have the thought to do that. And so I wonder if you talk a little bit about your mentorship and coaching approach and how you work with individuals who might be, steps beyond you.
No problem. So, I mean, one of the things that I did is I've gotten involved in a number of nonprofit organizations that work with people that they fall under the category of either underemployed or unemployed. And when we work with somebody in those atmospheres and in that area, we're actually walking them through. We meet with them it's a huge time commitment. You meet with them every week. You're reviewing their resumes. You're going through the want ads with them. You're doing what I call, you're pounding the pavement with them. Now, you're not doing it for them, but you're doing
Sure.
it with them. So to me, when you are in a mentoring or coaching relationship of any kind, for that mentoring or coaching relationship to be effective, you can't just sit and talk at somebody. That is not coaching. That is, I don't know. That's just a figurehead talking, right? To me, if you're going to really mentor somebody and you're really going to coach somebody, you're going to end up being shoulder to shoulder with that person and really walking down that road with them. And sometimes those roads are ugly. I was working with somebody who was really just down and out on their luck, and we were supposed to meet and they didn't show up, and I called and I texted and for 3 days tried to get a hold of them, only to find out that they were in jail.
Huh.
So sometimes you end up in situations where you're mentoring and you're coaching people who are just in a different way, a different place in their life. And I think if you're going to be a really good mentor or a really good coach, you have to be able to meet people in those ugly places.
Yeah.
You don't get to just cherry pick the easy cases. You don't get to just cherry pick who you want to talk to. If you're really going to be in it, then you got to jump in with 2 feet. You got to really dive in the deep end.
Yeah, I love that. I think, one of the things that happens a lot, and I think it's especially happening to young people now with the prevalence of YouTube and social media and places like this, where basically anyone can position themselves as an expert and go share whatever information they want. I think it's really easy to get discouraged because you hear these messages of success and these messages of, what worked for me, Mr. CEO. And then when it comes time to actually apply that in your life, it's really difficult. And I think that's what that disconnect there is where a really great coach can step in, or a good mentor can step in and help you bridge these gaps and turn that talk into something actionable. Because I think, for so many, they get talked at all the time, from all these different social channels and, super expert, whatever on the internet. And then when they can't seem to achieve, or they can't seem to accomplish whatever it is this person told them to do, then you slip into, feelings of insecurity, or that you're not good enough or smart enough or whatever. And so I think it's really great that you are approaching your mentorship in that way, because I think for people who need that, especially at that stage in life where they're either, don't have a job at all, or trying to find a way to improve their personal situation, those choices that they're making and the things that they're going through will have a significant effect on their life. Even if you've got a steady paycheck, they don't. And, helping them through something that's so impactful and so meaningful to their life, I think is really key. So thanks for doing that. I love your approach. So as we start to
actually, Ryan,
go ahead.
Before we end this, I had a question regarding your website and the
Oh, here it comes again. Watch out.
It comes again. Oh my God. You're making me nervous.
You said your clients can log in and check on the status of what people are working on. Are you using a third-party processing for that?
Yeah.
Or is it something
We are.
Can you share that secret with us?
Oh, absolutely. Mention my name. Get me a referral fee. Happy to do so. We use our project management system is called Accelo.
Okay.
ACCELO. And they have an amazing ability they're not inexpensive. They're not for somebody who's just getting started. They're geared towards agencies. I mean, that is what their main business is agencies and software development. So they're geared towards that, but they've been phenomenal to work with, and their system is it's just killer. It is just killer. So somebody wants some more information about them, I'm happy to talk about them. I'm happy to, send them to the right person to talk to. But yeah, they're great.
That's great. I hear nothing but agencies complaining about their project management systems.
Oh,
so if somebody actually got it right, that's great.
Yeah, I absolutely love them. They have been phenomenal to work with. And I think we ended up figuring out that we saved over 360 hours a month across our team.
Wow.
Going from the system that we were at to the system we're at now.
And that pays for itself right there.
Oh, easy. Yeah.
That's incredible. Well, cool. So Lori, can we just, I guess, sort of sign off with where can people find you online, learn more about the work you're doing, either your coaching and your advocacy work, or, either of your companies or both?
Yeah. So people can find us on the website. We have two. One is VMD, V as in Victor, M as in Mary, D as in Dog Services, vmdservices.com. And then the other one is mycpsolutions.com. And then here coming pretty soon, you'll be able to check out our podcast channel, which is called Before Happy Hour.
Oh, nice.
.com. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, looking forward to all that. And everybody swing by the website, check out the work they're doing, especially if you happen to be in the medical services industry or something. It seems like it could be a great fit. So, well, thank you so much for your time, Lori. We're really grateful to have done this and really appreciate your insights and everything.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Hope you guys have a great night.
Yeah, thanks so much. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.